As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right, we're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stuff.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's time, Sam, to review the draft for about 8 to 10 hours this week.
Let's go.
As if we didn't do enough this weekend. It's fun. It's like a blur, you know?
We did the draft, and then we reviewed the draft on Sunday, and then we'll be reviewing it again all week.
That's right.
And maybe edit next week.
But we're going to give you the in-depth team by team. We're going to start with the AFC and the NFC East here today, so stick with us. Schedule for the week, we're here live, 9 a.m. on YouTube on a Monday.
Yeah.
Head-to-head with Good Morning Football.
Right now.
And then...
Well, not even head-to-head. They don't exist anymore.
Oh, that's right. It would have been their review, too. It's
sabbatical.
Are they? Anyway. And then, so, extra show is going to be tomorrow at 10:30, Wednesday at 10:30, and then Thursday at 10:30, going through all the divisions, 2 divisions per show. If you haven't heard our first-round recap, we'll probably rehash all of it, but we did that Thursday night right after. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Some crazy people, Sam, that we appreciate staying up late with us. Like, thousands of people on the live stream with us at about 2 a.m. after Thursday night. That's the beauty of the draft.
The beauty of the draft.
So, you ready to get into it?
Yep, let's go.
All right, so we're gonna discuss the draft grades and some of the grades that were handed out, not just us grading or whatever it might be. It's just what have other people graded. We'll talk about everything.
Yeah, we have to give a shout out every year to our guy Rene Bugner on Twitter, X, who creates this composite of all the draft grades that are out there. So PFFs are in there as well, but so are a dozen plus other letter grades that have come out for the draft. So he puts them all together and creates this kind of composite GPA for all the NFL teams, and how everybody has drafted or graded these drafts.
All right, let's get into it, man. We'll start with the AFC East.
20, in fact, I see on the top
20
left.
different. Yeah, we'll talk about the aggregate grades, the PFF grade, what our thoughts are. Let's get into it. Buffalo Bills, starting in the AFC East. Bills from PFF get a B-.
Now, I see we have the most generous grades in the entire list, which, look, we said this before. We're
oh, yeah, we do, huh?
We give out slightly generous grades on the basis that we work for all 32 teams. Now, that being said, I feel like being more generous than the NFL.com is a step too far.
Might be too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was some science to it, too, I think, from Trevor that we talked about on the show yesterday, where he said it was in relation to the big board. I'm going to sneeze, I think.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm good. Went away.
Great.
We're good. It was judging picks in relation to the big board. Where's Thor? He's always harsh on. He's always very strong. He's not even on the.
I don't see Thor.
Oh, he's not on the list yet. He's not on the list yet. I need it. Thor, send your grades over. They're always aggressive. You know there'll be some Fs in there. You know the Vikings are getting an A+ because he loves J.J. McCarthy. We know that's happening.
It's true. Yeah.
So Buffalo Bills, number 22 in the aggregate, B- per PFF. Couple teams. Doug Farrar had an A-. That was the highest grade for the Buffalo Bills. Look, the biggest story here is they're sitting there late first round. They trade out to the Kansas City Chiefs. And again, I think this, when we talk about stories that we go back to and rehash years from now, the Bills were sitting there with wide receiver 5 on the board. They could have had the 5th receiver off the board, anybody that they want, knowing that it's a deep wide receiver class, knowing that it was a huge need for the Bills after trading Stephon Diggs, and they traded down with the Kansas City Chiefs. A couple other receivers went off the board before they picked again, and then top of day 2, they take Keon Coleman out of Florida State. That's the biggest story. I'll run through some of the other names. Cole Bishop, the safety from Utah. You saw him on the screen while I was rambling. Dwayne Carter, the defensive tackle from Duke. Ray Davis, the running back from Kentucky. And a bunch of others. Your thoughts for the Bills?
Yeah, I mean, their big story is obviously that whole wide receiver dynamic. Sitting there 28 overall, having traded away Stephon Diggs in what was clearly not a pre-planned move, with the contract extension that he'd signed, with the trade they got for him. This was not when that was supposed to happen, if indeed it was ever supposed to happen. Neither was the trade so tempting that they couldn't turn it down, right? They had just obviously reached their end with Stephon Diggs, But consequently, they needed to replace him. You know, they have some players on the roster, but none of them are a high impact, you know, top end wide receiver. It's guys like Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, who became a much bigger part of that offense late last year, but you wouldn't want as your number one wide receiver necessarily. So everyone assumed Buffalo's just taken the best wide receiver available at 28 overall, or was going to go aggressively trade upwards and go get wide receiver 4, maybe even wide receiver 3 at the bottom of the top 10. Didn't end up happening. They're there at 28. They do have that chance to take wide receiver 5, whoever they thought that was, and they trade back with Kansas City, let the Chiefs select Xavier Worthy, and then they trade back again out of the first round. In each occasion, the team coming up took a wide receiver. So they went from wide receiver 5 to wide receiver 8. Now, for Buffalo, it might have been the same player. If Keon Coleman was their guy the whole way, they were able to trade down twice, which only, I think, netted them pick swaps, like moving up in rankings as opposed to getting additional picks themselves. But theoretically, they got additional draft capital and were able to select their guy anyway, if that was how it worked. But to me, so that's one element that's really interesting. They took that risk that they were willing to trade back a couple of times and still get their guy, and do it, at least on one occasion, to their, I guess, their biggest rival in Kansas City. You know, there's that phrase, right? In order for it to be a rivalry, both teams have to win, as opposed to. I mean,
the Bills have won a lot, just the regular season games.
Yeah, but not the important ones in the postseason when they lose.
It's a rivalry.
I don't know. Anyway, the point being, they let Kansas City go and take the guy they wanted, which is interesting in itself. And then Keon Coleman being the guy that they identified as like the answer. And the reason I say that is they drafted one wide receiver, they had 10 or 11 draft picks, and did not come back and get another one. And even in the undrafted free agent pool, you know, you see that every year. Teams sometimes will take a guy and then they'll come back and they'll grab 4 or 5 free agents after the draft at that position. The Bills didn't even really do that. They added a couple of wide receivers as undrafted free agents in a giant undrafted free agent pool. So Keon Coleman is basically it. They've said he's our answer. And we've talked about him a lot in the pre-draft process. Like, I like him as a receiver. I think there is absolutely a pathway to him being a very good NFL player, but he's not the cleanest of prospects in terms of there's no concerns, there's no red flags, there's no areas of worry. He's a risky prospect, and the Bills have identified him as the guy to come in and be, at the very minimum, a very big part of that offense, you know, next to Khalil Shakir and the tight ends and that kind of thing. Just a sort of fascinating individual evaluation by them.
I think it's interesting when you look at the Bills, the evolution of their receiving core. Remember when before Stephon Diggs got there, it was John Brown and Cole Beasley were the first 2 guys who really started to get Josh Allen going and getting on track. They had a distinct slot in Cole Beasley, distinct deep threat in John Brown. Then Stephon Diggs gets there, and it felt like, wow, that's a perfect number 1 wide receiver to pull everything together. Since that point now, you lose, and at points they had, Gabe Davis, who was more your deep threat, and they still had Diggs. So now Diggs is gone. You lose the true number 1, and I mentioned this on the live show. A couple of years ago, Brandon Beane said, yeah, we're trying to get a little bit better creating plays after the catch, and that was the draft 2 years ago when they bring in James Cook, the running back, and Khalil Shakir, the wide receiver, and it's like, all right, that's something that they don't necessarily have. Now it feels like, Keon Coleman is a big receiver, but he's very good after the catch, has those punt return skills. You still have Khalil Shakir. They bring in Curtis Samuel, and that's his game, right, is all the short stuff and gimmicky type things and create after the catch. Dalton Kincaid, underneath, short area, tight end, and you still have Cook, who's the featured back here. So it does seem like the Bills are trying to create plays after the catch, short area, short passing game. That's not to say, clearly, I think they're expecting more from Keon Coleman. He's not just a yak guy. They've seen the contested catches, the one-handed catches, the downfield wins that Keon Coleman has had, and saying, okay, he could be an all-around guy. They believe that he can do more, but it's interesting to me that is a part of the top 5 playmakers on Buffalo is yak-driven.
The fit here is fascinating to me. You need to hear more about what they plan on doing with Keon Coleman, because I would urge anybody to go and listen to Matt Harmon's video on YouTube about Keon Coleman. He's essentially the key characteristic of Coleman is you've got all the contested catch stuff, you've got some good after the catch skills, but he does not separate against man coverage in particular. He's actually quite good in zones and understands how to separate against zone coverage, but in separation percentage against single coverage, he's in the 0th percentile in your PFF IQ, right? That's bad. That's not good at all, right? And
0th.
Yeah, the 0th. So does not essentially separate at any point against man coverage. Now, the key characteristic of a classic X wide receiver is those guys need to beat man coverage. That's what they do. That's the guy that can get pressed at the line of scrimmage, and he needs to be able to beat man coverage consistently. So that's where their hole is, right? That was what Stephon Diggs did for them, even if he's not necessarily a classic X receiver in terms of size and all those kinds of things. That was his role in that offense. So now you've got Khalil Shakir, who's not a classic X wide receiver. Curtis Samuel, definitely not. And any of the guys on the depth chart lower down, KJ Hamler, I mean, Matt Collins-ish. But that's the hole, right? So if Keon Coleman is being brought in to be that, there's immediate red flags that is not what he does well. And Matt Harmon sort of said the guys that have succeeded with that production profile, this is Matt Harmon of Reception, Perception, Fame, and Yahoo Sports, etc. So he said the guys that have succeeded with that profile are one of two types of players. It's either guys that became big slot weapons, right, moved inside, and that's what they did, or weirdly boom or bust deep threats, guys like DJ Chark and Will Fuller. There were a few other names like that. Now, Coleman's definitely not that, right? He just doesn't have the gas to be the consistent deep threat. So logically, he becomes the big slot. We already have Curtis Samuel and other guys, and Dalton Kincaid, who was literally the big slot for them last year. So that spot is actually kind of taken up. So it doesn't look like a natural fit unless you hear from them like how they plan on making those jigsaw pieces fit together. And that's why, again, it feels a little worrying that was their one swing at the bat when it comes to wide receiver.
So the other part of the draft with the Bills, as you mentioned, they kept trading down. They would pick swap, jump up 30 picks here, 40 picks there. I thought it was an important draft for the Bills, given all the turnover this offseason. So they added a lot of volume. I always like that. Cole Bishop, their second-round pick, the safety out of Utah, really intriguing prospect. He's very athletic. I think he's a guy that right now I don't think he's got the skills to be an all-around safety. I don't necessarily trust him in deep coverage. But when I was watching him, reminded me a little bit of Kenny Vaccaro, who spent a lot of time in the NFL. I think when Vaccaro came out as a first-round pick, very athletic, out of Texas, covered the slot, and people expected him to be like the guy that slows down slot receivers and is a hammer in the run game. I think Vaccaro, for the most of his career, just became like a true box safety who could match up with tight ends here and there. I see that with Bishop. Coverage as a free safety was poor using PFF grades, but Bishop, 99th percentile athleticism using PFF gas, tested well. I think he can cover tight ends extremely well. He's just, to me, he's your pure box safety. And so they already have Mike Edwards. They already have Taylor Rapp on the roster. I wonder if Bishop has a specific role carved out for him, taking away tight ends. Again, I know Travis Kelce might only have a year or two left with the Chiefs, but very specifically in that matchup or against a Ravens team with the Mark Andrews. That matchup, I think, will be intriguing once we get to the NFL season for rookie Cole Bishop. Any other of the picks for the Bills that you wanted to highlight? Ray Davis, of course.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of really interesting names actually added. Dwayne Carter, I think, has a lot of talent, incredible bull rush strength. I think he's very close to sort of, if you can string together some moves and not just try and run through everybody every single play, but like actually disengage from the bull rush once you've got some vertical movement, I think he can be a disruptive player. Cedric Van Pran, the center from Georgia, anyone that listened to our Ramon Foster offensive line show before the draft, he really likes that guy. Thinks was he first or second on his list of centers? Like very high.
Had him third, right behind JPJ and Zach Frazier, I believe.
But that guy has a pathway to starting for this team as a 5th-round draft pick. Javon Solomon from Troy, I think, is a really intriguing pick as well, a guy that has some juice as a pass rusher. And then their last pick, Travis Clayton from the International Player Pathway. Oh, this is fascinating because he was a rugby player, but not a good one. He was apparently in the 8th tier of rugby in England, which is basically you could play in the 8th tier of rugby, like today. You know what I mean? Like that's not high. So I don't know how you identify. Number one, I don't know how a guy that's that athletic and that freaky as an athlete survived in the 8th tier of rugby without somebody putting him higher just on athleticism alone, even if he couldn't catch a ball. But he was plucked from that kind of level, has a boxing background as well, and it's just such a freaky athlete that, again, he got drafted in the 7th round with 0 football experience. So that, I mean, it's a Mailata story, except at a much lower level of rugby.
See, you can't get this from every other podcast. That's why we are a top 5 podcast featuring an Irishman who lives here in America.
That's right.
Top 5 NFL podcast with those terms. Other shout out to Javon Solomon from Troy, edge rusher with some pass rush juice. I think solid players. Again, when you go back, it's like I would have chosen a few different players, but I see intriguing time for the Bills where a lot of these guys can contribute right away.
Solomon is a really interesting body type where he looks like James Harrison, but if you stretched James Harrison's arms, like he has 34-inch arms at 6'1".
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like
he's about 260.
He's a big, he looks like James Harrison, except his arms are like way longer. I'm like, immediately, first thing I saw of him was like, oh, that's the sort of James Harrison, Contavious Street type body. And then I was like, wait, how long are that dude's arms? They're just like hanging down there at this unnatural length. So he's got this sort of, I kind of wonder if he's got all the advantages of, the James Harrison, Elvis Dumerville, short, low down to the ground leverage plays, but with the arm length to not get just bodied by bigger offensive tackles that can get into him.
Yeah, Solomon's a nice pick in the 5th round. I think he has a chance to jump right into that defensive line rotation.
Yeah.
Create some pass rush off the edge. All right. Got no more use for the Bills.
Sweet.
As a busy parent, you want to give your kids a head start in their financial future, but investing can often be both confusing and time-consuming. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it easy for you to set up an investment account for your child that grows with them and helps prepare for their financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial future. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. UGMA stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can't invest while they're minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolio is managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Hey guys, for tomorrow, can we get Chris to hop in? Can we just, since we have it recorded, can we just pop Chris in there to do some?
I think since we now have cracked the technology for speeding up terms and conditions voice, I need to hear Steve on Helium reading out the terms and conditions.
So I just read it regular and let them
do their work.
Let the tech do the work. So I don't need to try to, go super fast or anything like that.
I feel like Steve as a chipmunk would be quite funny.
All right, let's go to the Miami Dolphins. They started with Chop Robinson in the 1st round, the edge rusher out of Penn State, Patrick Paul, the tackle out of Houston, Jalen Wright, the running back out of Tennessee. Of course, they got the 4-3 running back. And then where'd the Dolphins end up on this consensus?
23rd,
right behind the Buffalo Bills.
This one feels harsh. I like this draft more than seemingly everybody else, except somebody called Ryan McChrystal from Sharp Football, who has an A. I like this draft. I think this is good.
Chop Robinson was the first one. I wouldn't say it was a reach, but consensus board using like the later 20s. It was the first one where it was like, all right, the edge rush. He went closer to the quote-unquote big 3 edge rushers than the consensus board would have implied.
Which I actually think was correct. I feel like Chop Robinson, we've talked about this a little bit before. All the Penn State guys, for some reason, pre-draft, it was like, why are those guys falling? Chop Robinson with his pass rush explosiveness and Olu Fashanu with his pass blocking shot. Like, why are all these guys slipping? And actually, they didn't. Once you got to the draft, Fashanu went top 10. Chop Robinson went 21. If you rewind all the way to the start, when you're like, who are the guys to look at? Those were people you would have identified in those areas, and actually that's exactly where they ended up going. So I do feel like Chop Robinson, okay, his run defense isn't as good as the 3 guys that went ahead of him, right? On the other hand, his pass rushing kind of is. So maybe not Latu, but the other 2, like Chop Robinson's got legitimate pass rushing ability, multiple seasons, back-to-back years with a PFF pass rushing grade of 91 or higher. Incredible explosiveness, the twitchiest of the three, I think. And I actually think that was the right sort of division to say you've got the big three, but then Chop Robinson is closer to those guys than he is everybody else. And that was essentially the dynamic that came to play. So for Miami to grab him there, I think is fine. It falls within the margins, in my opinion, of where he should have gone. Patrick Paul, the Houston offensive tackle, I've said before when we did our offensive line show, he was the next tier down guy that I would go for. You know, everyone's talking about Tyler Guyton or Jordan Morgan or Kingsley Suamataia. Patrick Paul is the guy I would have identified of that group as the one to take a shot on. I think his athleticism is elite. His size is perfect. He's got good tape. He's got good track record already. And then the guys in the mid-rounds I think are great additions as well. Jalen Wright, okay, it's not like it's a need, right? But Jalen Wright was the one explosive player in this draft where you're like, he finds a crease, he's gone. Those are the running backs that are succeeding right now, including all of the Miami backfield. Mohamed Kamara.
So they now have Raheem Mostert, Devin Achane, and Jalen Wright.
Yeah.
All 4-2, 4-3 running backs.
Right. All similar style, all explosive guys that can take it to the house once they get a crease. But then it kept going. Like Mohamed Kamara, really fascinating edge rusher from Colorado State. Crazy twitched up athlete. Now, hand usage doesn't happen a lot of the time. Just seems to forget he possesses them on some rushes, which isn't ideal. But again, like 5th round, if you're taking...
He also ran a 4.57.
That's what I'm saying. If you're a 5th round, you're taking a swing on one of the most athletic, twitchy pass rushers in the entire draft, that's good value. Malik Washington is a wide receiver, a pure slot guy that a lot of people loved in this draft. So I thought that was a really good draft by them.
Yeah, so I try to balance this, right? I don't think teams go in and say, okay, we're coming out of this with 2 edges and 2 receivers. So most teams are going to tell you they trusted their board. But other times, you know, I think a lot of teams sometimes are influenced by what they just saw or how their season ended or whatever it might be. So Miami, whether they intended to do this or not, in a season where all their edge defenders got hurt, they add 2. And guys that I think can contribute right away. At least Chop Robinson certainly going to contribute right away. But in the right role. I've always compared Chop Robinson to your Carl Lawson type, you know, who's going to be an explosive pass rusher, doesn't play the run all that well. But that's fine. They've got Jalen Phillips. They've got Bradley Chubb. They brought in Shaq Barrett. And now you've got Chop. So you've got your maybe 3rd down NASCAR package for Miami there. You need to be able to rotate in Miami, especially early in the season. So I think that's a great, you know, contributor there. Throw Kamara into the mix as well. And then on the offensive line, they were one of those teams that probably was going to be in the market for a tackle on the turn there. And that's what they got. Patrick Paul, as far as how many times am I going to use the word developmental? But, you know, being there ready to start in year 2 or 3, Patrick Paul, I think he could do that at left tackle. And that's insurance immediately for Teron Armstead, who just, you know, always ends up getting hurt. So I think that's great. They added the speed that they like. And then I just want to touch on Malik Washington a little bit, the receiver out of Virginia, getting him at pick 184 in the 6th round. He is your classic shorter slot receiver. And nothing against Braxton Berrios, but for as explosive as Miami's offense was, how many times was it like, hey, Braxton Berrios and River Craycraft are getting a lot of targets when Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are taken away? I think Malik Washington is a perfect complementary slot as a good route runner with decent ball skills for his size as well. So I think he has a chance to contribute right away as well. Bring in Taj Washington as well to compete at receiver. So yeah, I'm a fan of Miami's draft, the players that they got, and the fits for this roster.
Agreed. I feel like the grading, not just ours, but across the board, has been harsh on Miami. I think that's a better draft
Give your
than
grade.
people give
What's
it
your
credit
grade?
for. I would give that some variety of A. I think that's a really good draft. It's one of my favorite drafts.
A minus?
Sure.
A minus for Sam, for the Miami Dolphins. We went faster there. We might be able to get through this faster than we thought.
I wouldn't bet on that.
New England Patriots are up next. If I could find them.
They're
spelled it wrong.
Yeah.
They're right below them.
Yeah. It shouldn't be that hard to find.
Well, I was searching and
obviously Drake May is their
I know.
headline.
I mean, I know who they got. New England Patriots. I was looking for their their composite grade here. Are they in a similar spot too?
No, they're 12th.
No, they're 12th. Composite grade's 12th. PFF B+. Of course, it all started with Drake May at pick 3. In the 2nd round, Jalen Polk, the wide receiver out of Washington. 3rd round, Caden Wallace, the tackle out of Penn State. It was an offensive-centric draft, only one defensive player. So they did double up at receiver. Javon Baker from UCF, they got him in the 4th round. The one defensive player is cornerback Marcellus Dial from South Carolina. And they doubled up at quarterback at pick 193 in round 6. They bring in Joe Milton from Tennessee. And then tight end Jaheim Bell. Don't sleep on him. He can do some damage in the right role.
Maybe they doubled up at tight end.
Oh. I see what you're suggesting there.
Yeah.
I saw somebody joke that they brought Joe Milton in just to make Drake May look accurate by proxy.
I like that.
You think Drake May's inaccurate? Wait till. No, Milton with an absolute cannon for an arm. I mean, look, I would.
Maybe they brought him in just. You remember when Jacoby Brissett is the designated Hail Mary guy?
Yeah.
Maybe that's Milton now.
Yeah,
Hail Mary from anywhere on the field.
From the 30.
Yeah.
You could throw a Hail Mary. All right, let's discuss Drake May at 3.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Drake May. So, a lot of the sort of top quarterback discussion, it's like, do you like the quarterback that they took in isolation? I think everyone here thinks that Drake May was the second quarterback in this draft. So, getting him at 3 overall makes sense, is good business. But the decision was not really Drake May versus other quarterbacks at that spot. It was Drake May versus trading down and what you could potentially pick up. Now, we don't know exactly what was on the table, but there were reports that there was an offer out there from Minnesota that had all of the first-round picks, 11, 23, and a future first, and the Patriots still weren't taking it.
Yeah.
If that was the offer, I think I'd have taken it. But anyway, the point being, if you don't, now you've got your back against the wall trying to put an offense around Drake May with, 7 more draft picks, which isn't easy to do. So Jalen Polk is a good receiver, really good receiver, actually. Like the guy that flashed on tape when you're watching Penix or Rome Odunze tape, he's a really good player, and they obviously needed wide receiver help. I don't know if he's, the problem the Patriots have had is just a real lack of difference makers at wide receiver. Like they seem to have had quite a lot of guys that are fine, but all of them together still equals just okay / not great. You need a difference maker from somewhere. Now maybe they can find a trade for Brandon Ayuk. Like maybe that's on the table now that the draft is finished. And if you added Brandon Ayuk to this receiving core, now you're cooking. But absent that guy, it just feels like a lot of players that are quite similar. Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Polk, Juju Smith-Schuster, Demario Douglas, Javon Baker, KJ Osborne. It's like a lot of guys that are just complementary pieces, but they're not complementing anything at the moment. So, look, I think Polk's a good player. I like Javon Baker as well. I think the 2 players they added at receiver are good. They did come back and hit offensive line a couple of times, the 3rd and the 4th round, Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson. They both felt kind of reachy in terms of draft picks. And again, I'm not sure either one of those is solving what is quite a weak offensive line on paper. So I think what this is a decision to take the quarterback rather than rebuild the infrastructure, and a sort of immediate reflection of what that, like the consequences that brings.
Yeah, so I think to sum it up, they felt like they had to take the quarterback. Now, if we went back and we said, here's the trade that was on the table, and let's use a little hindsight, here's what we know. If they had been able to trade back to 11, that was the pick that the Vikings used to just trade up one spot to secure J.J. McCarthy.
Right.
So theoretically, the Patriots may have left something on the table that could have netted them J.J. McCarthy, whatever they would have gotten at pick 23, and a first-rounder next year for the Minnesota Vikings, or traded down with the Giants, say taking J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix, QB4, and then next year had the Giants first-rounder as well.
If they had taken that trade down, options that would have been on the table for them, right? They would have been within striking distance of a small trade like Minnesota did to go after maybe Rome Odunze at 9, maybe Olu Fashanu, who ended up going 11, but the Jets would have taken him a pick earlier if you hadn't traded. So Fashanu, Talise Fuanga, one of the best defensive players. Maybe
They would have still taken a QB though. Patriots if they traded down?
No, I'm saying that's the whole point of trading down, is don't get the quarterback. Go build the infrastructure. So all of the players that would have been available, you could have gotten one of the big 3 wide receivers. You could have gotten Fashanu, Fuanga, Amarius Mims, one of the top tackles up there. Any of the best defensive players on the board would have still been available at that spot. 23 would have put you Literally, it's the pick that Brian Thomas Jr. went in. Again, there's a bunch of offensive linemen there. Graham Barton went after that. The second wave of guys or any of the second wave of wide receivers. So, and then obviously you have a first rounder next year to then put yourself in position to go get the quarterback if you somehow win more games than you're expected to this year. So that is what you're dealing with. Like,
that's the decision. We're just laying out
Drake
what the
May
decision was.
and Jalen Polk and some reaches at offensive line and Javon Baker, or one of the best receivers or tackles in the draft, another high-end receiver or tackle, and the capacity to go and get a quarterback next year in the first round, who you probably don't rate as high as Drake May. But like, that was the decision they made, the calculus, and they ended up going Drake May, and you see the results.
So I'm good with the Drake May pick, by the way. I wanted to lay out both sides of what I think New England was weighing with those decisions. Text from Mike, Patriots fan Mike, one of our listeners here. It's basically like, I feel good, but doesn't feel great coming out of it. And I think that's fair, because you're never going to solve everything if you're the New England Patriots. And I also didn't necessarily love some of the offensive line players that they chose. I'll talk about that in a second. But Jalen Polk was wide receiver 10 off the board, right? You were never going to get a guy we like. Drake May now has his number one weapon. You're just not in position to do that. 9 other receivers already came off the board. To your point, Polk is a complementary piece on a team of complementary pieces. Not to, beat a dead horse here. But yeah, this is basically the same supporting cast that Mac Jones really struggled with. So it's going to take some time, I think, here. For all the people that are calling for Drake May to sit, it's like, throw Jacoby Brissett out there with this team. We'll see what they end up doing. But the first step, I think, as far as the rebuild goes with the Patriots, the 2 offensive linemen that they took, Caden Wallace out of Penn State, Layden Robinson out of Texas A&M, just as from a model perspective. Wallace, so I've been using percentiles. What if I just put like a score on them, 1 to 100, just convert that to a score. So he's like a 17, and Layden Robinson's about a 27. Those guys don't hit often. There were probably some better options at those points. And then Javon Baker's the double up at receiver. I do love that, doubling up at receiver.
Sure.
And Baker, as far as a 4th-round pick goes, probably one of the best available options there. So I think the Patriots did not as well as they could, but about as expected, and they tried to load up on offense and fill some of the holes that they have on that roster.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a case to be made that Drake May should sit, not because Drake May needs to sit, because he's not ready, it's a thing for him, but because the situation, like that on paper, that doesn't look much better than Carolina had a year ago at this time, right? Now, Carolina's ended up being a lot worse than we thought it was, but if you rewind to where we were last season, Carolina's offensive situation, we thought their line would be okay, and their receivers, there was a world you could muddle through, and it ended up being a complete and total catastrophe. And Bryce Young had one of the worst rookie seasons we've ever seen from a quarterback. So, the Patriots doesn't look that much better on paper than what Carolina had. They would want to get a handle very quickly in preseason on how bad that's going to look, whether or not you need to sit Drake May. Like, if they're going through preseason and their first string offense is just getting wrecked, I would think about just sacrificing Jacoby Brissett for the year.
Get out there. I mean, it's like the one of those creep back toward average offensive lines where you look at the receiving core and you say, okay, if we get the best of all of these guys, it can work.
Yeah.
That's Juju Smith-Schuster. He's played good ball at various points in his career. Kendrick Bourne's been a reliable target. Demario Douglas showed a lot as a rookie in the slot last year. KJ Osborne's been a very nice complementary 3rd, 4th type of receiver for teams. And then Jalen Polk added to the mix to go with Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper at tight end. Again, solid options. The aggregate thing, though, hasn't worked well for New England in the last couple of years. Not having an impact receiver or any kind of pass catcher has been a big issue for the Patriots. So, look, I'm good. I think they make the right move in getting Drake May. We went back and forth theorizing all the different things. I understand the trade down. I'm a Drake May fan. I think he'll get there, but it's going to take some time, I think, to get the rest of the supporting cast there in New England. Sound good?
Yep.
Got no more use for the Patriots. Let's go to New York Jets. Jets come in 19 in the composite. PFF gives an A, like their draft relative to other to draft slot. Is this one that you did like, or were you pushing back against this a little bit yesterday? Can't remember. This one was fine. Yeah, so all the players drafted relative to the consensus board. A couple weird ones in there, doubling up at running back so 2 running backs in their top 5 picks. They had the number 10 overall pick. We had theorized Brock Bowers as the choice there. They had that opportunity. They instead decided to trade down and then didn't pick him again. They take Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, a guy that we both really like at tackle. A 3rd rounder, Malachi Corley, receiver out of Western Kentucky. The 2 running backs, as we mentioned, Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, and then Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State in the 4th and 5th round, respectively. They did get Quantez Stigers, the cornerback out of the CFL, who's an intriguing story. And then Jordan Travis, the developmental quarterback out of Florida State, coming off of his injury. What'd you think about the Jets draft?
I think it was okay. I definitely think Miami had a better draft than the Jets did, and yet the grades have it flipped the other way around. I think Fashanu was a good pick. Like 11, I think he could be the best tackle from this draft in a few years' time. His footwork is insane. His pass protection is crazy, and the Jets might need him to play year 1. Not all the time. Tyron Smith is slated to start at left tackle, but the last time Tyron Smith made it through a full season, I think, was 2016. So the chances are Fashanu's going to be on the field at some point this season, and therefore it's a good pick, and it's good it's a good landing spot for him as well, and a great mentor to try and move him along quickly with Tyron Smith. Malachi Corley, I didn't like him as much as other people did, but his skill set does fit within that offense. So they didn't have a need necessarily at wide receiver with the moves they've already made. But Corley definitely brings a skill set that isn't necessarily there already, so it makes sense from we can add this guy to the mix, and it doesn't detract from anything else. Braylon Allen, I just don't think is a particularly useful running back. I think Isaiah Davis, who they got around later, is a better player and will make a bigger impact. Jordan Travis, similarly, I don't know has much to bring to the table. Quantez Stigers is kind of interesting. I didn't see much of him, but what I did see looked quite impressive.
Yeah, some depth to the cornerback room.
We got his CFL grades.
We do, yeah. Go get him.
Yeah,
I'm a Fashanu fan, and so I look at when we talk about Dallas later on the show and Tyler Guyton for the Cowboys, their first rounder, who I thought probably needed time to maybe sit and develop. We're talking about QBs sitting and developing. I think Guyton probably needs some development time, and I'm not saying Fashanu needs development time, but I think he certainly needs to improve in the run game. He's got one of the best pass blocking profiles we've ever seen at PFF. I think Fashanu has a chance to be a top 5 pass protector in the NFL, but you want the rest of his game to catch up. And I think as with Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses at both tackle spots, there's an opportunity for Fashanu to maybe sit. And, I'm sure he'll get in there at some point. Tyron Smith is unlikely to play all 17 games. They might be better off sitting Tyron Smith just a little bit if they want to make a playoff push. So I think they can ease Fashanu in, and I think it's a good fit. The one thing I will say about Fashanu is I don't think he's one of those tackles who starts at guard and then kicks out. I think he's a pure, I don't want to use the word finesse, but he's a pure pass block first type of tackle. Those guys don't work well.
Hit him with the finesse label.
It's not finesse.
Hit him with it.
No, because it's one of those, he works with Duke, and he's going to,
Did we talk about his hand size?
He's got small hands.
Not just small hands, but
that would be really bad if he was a running back. We know that.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's under 9, right?
It's
smaller than Pickett.
Implausibly small hands. So where is it?
Is there a chance that he?
Did he just not stretch his hand when they measured? You know what I mean? They
yeah.
Did he just put it out there like that and they measured it roughly?
Put your hands up again. What are you, a 7?
No, mine are comparable. They're in the same ballpark as I have ridiculously small hands, right?
That's what Fashanu's hands look
like. And I believe mine are in the area of Fashanu's.
Did he throw the test like C.J. Stroud did?
Fashanu's hands. So 6'6", 71st percentile, 312 pounds, 53rd percentile, arm length 34 inches, that's 57th percentile, hand size 8.5 inches, which is the 1st percentile. Kenny Pickett has bigger hands than Fashanu does.
Hurts with grip strength and everything, so it's an interesting one.
Yeah. On the other hand,
I don't want to say anything bad about Duke trains him, and he's probably got he's got the 700-pound trap bar deadlift and everything, and you're gonna say he's finesse.
From a physics,
I'm just saying he's more of a pass blocker than a run blocker. We'll say that.
From a pure physics perspective,
that's difficult.
Pounds per square inch. Think how much impact his punch is making through those tiny little hands. Wow. Anyway, Quantez Stigers, CFL stats. What do we we got here? 69 targets last season, gave up 49 catches, which is quite a large completion percentage. But
because it's the CFL.
Yes. Coverage grade above 86, 5 interceptions, 8 forced incompletions.
Did he have a better coverage grade than Gary Peters?
Oh, no. I only – let's find out.
Gary has been balling in the CFL the last couple of years.
Gary Peters. No, he didn't, but it was close.
Gary Peters is legit.
Gary Peters over 90.
Thank you.
Stiggers.
Justified.
86.
For those who don't know, 2014 was the first year we had college grades. Gary Peters from Clemson, unbelievable grade. We had the grades. We didn't know what to do with them. So I pushed Gary Peters as a guy that the NFL should keep an eye on. Didn't get drafted.
Grabby Peters.
He grabbed a lot,
yeah.
But he had a good coverage grade, and he's been very good in the CFL. It wasn't just because I missed on the evaluation, though. There were off-field concerns with Gary.
Grabby didn't give up a touchdown last year.
Yeah, he's awesome.
6 interceptions, 13 forced incompletions.
If I was being disingenuous, I would say the guy that I said could be a first-rounder in the NFL is balling in the CFL, and I'm justified.
Yeah.
But I would never do such things.
No. I wonder why he hasn't had a call.
Well, the off-field concerns might still be. Malachi Corley, just want to discuss him a little bit. He was a guy that, of all the receivers, people said, look, this is get the ball in his hands, yak-centric guy. There's not a lot of yak-centric receivers in this draft. That was the one thing that he does specifically well. And when we talk about the compliments to Mike Williams, to Garrett Wilson, to Alan Lazard, who's still on the roster right now, Corley brings something different, right? He's got running back type of skills, so he'll be your jet sweep guy, change of pace, underneath receiver to create after the catch. So as far as fit goes, I think Corley fits something that the Jets don't have much of.
Yeah, he's been comped a lot to Deebo Samuel, and while I think that's a hell of a stretch, even if you just tacked on the word light to the back end of that gives you an idea of what they should be doing with him within that offense, right? Deebo Samuel light. Let's just give him that kind of role and see what happens.
Anything else on the Jets?
Not really. I mean, I think so. Yeah, again, I don't think Braylon Allen has much to bring to the table, but he's a big, powerful back that, is only 20 years old and has been jacked out of his mind since he was like 17. So, you can see what they like about it. I just don't think it's going to work.
Between him and Isaiah Davis, they double up, and I think, one of those guys backing up Breece Hall is going to happen. All right. We got no more use for the Jets. Let's move on to the NFC East, starting with the Dallas Cowboys.
All in, baby.
Breaking news this morning, by the way. Zeke Elliott has returned to the Dallas Cowboys. It was rumored last week that prior to the draft, the Cowboys brought Zeke in. They were kicking the tires on old friend Zeke Elliott. He had 1 year away from Dallas playing with the New England Patriots. Zeke is back after Dallas does not draft a running back. Remember, they were rumored to be targeting a running back in rounds 2 or 3. They did not. And so Zeke is back to play with the Cowboys.
Proven weapon. So it was labeled.
Per Ian Rappaport.
Yeah.
Proven weapon.
A bunch of people on Twitter suggested if you simply dropped the proven from that. Or the weapon. Just proven. He's proven.
Cowboys draft, however, it starts with Tyler Guyton, the tackle out of Oklahoma. They go to edge rusher Marshawn Nealon out of Western Michigan. They go back to the offensive line with guard Cooper Beebe. Cowboys draft in the composite. Lands at 26. The composite grades did not love the Dallas Cowboys, a B from PFF.
Yeah. Which feels about right? It's okay.
Yeah.
Guyton is obviously it's a first round pick, so he's the one that the whole thing is going to hinge on, particularly because they had those needs on the offensive line. What the 5 offensive line now look like is going to be fascinating because Tyler Smith gives you that flexibility. He can play guard or tackle. It sounds like they want him to play guard, but if he does, that means potentially both of your starting tackles are problem spots because quietly, last season coming off that injury, right tackle was by far the biggest problem they had on that offensive line. Terrence Steele coming off that injury played terribly. Now, if you think he's going to get back to 100% and this year you're going to get high-end play from him again, then it is just Tyler Guyton at left tackle, Tyler Smith at left guard. But if Terrence Steele is it's just the injury has broken him and he's not any good anymore, then you actually need a right tackle from somewhere.
Yeah, I want to break down Guyton a little bit as a prospect. I just want to lay out what the what the data says about Guyton. And I'll start with the Cowboys have a great history of drafting first-round offensive linemen. Some of those players that have hit over the years have not been. We haven't had college data on, so it's tough to compare them necessarily. But Travis Frederick at center, Tyron Smith at tackle, Zach Martin, one of the best guards in the league. Who else was I missing? There's somebody else in there. But the Cowboys have done a great job. But I think all of those guys, Tyler Smith, who you just mentioned, was a first rounder. All of those guys, either like a Tyler Smith, had very good PFF production, and then panned out in the NFL level. And I imagine if we had PFF production on Zach Martin, we did have 1 year of Travis Frederick actually going back. It was very good. Tyler Guyton's probably, we'll say, the worst production guy that they've drafted in the first round. So can they continue their magic of developing tackles? As we've described, Guyton, when he gets his hands in the right position, when his technique is flawless, it looks unbelievable. It's just a matter of doing it play to play, both from a pass pro standpoint and from a run game standpoint. He's got some ugly losses in there, both on film at Oklahoma and at the Senior Bowl. But he's also a late bloomer type, former tight end, right? And so that's like Jason Peters back in the day goes undrafted as a tight end conversion who needed a couple of years. There's a decent history of tight end conversions, becoming tackle prospects, but it takes time. So him going to Dallas, like if he had gone to San Francisco and they're like, hey, you're going to sit behind Trent Williams, you're going to sit for a couple of years and we're going to develop you, it made more sense. With Dallas, is he going to be forced right into the starting lineup at left tackle? But after they drafted Cooper Beebe, the guard out of Kansas State, who I think is far more ready to play in the NFL right now than Guyton is, does that give that flexibility to kick Tyler Smith out to left tackle, put Cooper Beebe maybe at left guard, and give Guyton the ability to learn on the job here, or to learn as a backup?
The Tyler Smith pick is an interesting one because Tyler Smith, I think from a pass protection standpoint, they were in a similar place. Tyler Smith was a much better run blocker, but it was also at Tulsa where he was just destroying people at a lower level of competition. So I actually think Tyler Smith was being described as a very raw prospect coming out that would need time, and actually Dallas ended up plugging him straight in there. And he played tackle as well as guard. Like he's played both positions and looked good doing both because of the, Tyron Smith is always hurt thing. So actually, if they're able to do that, if that's an indication that Dallas is just really good at this, they can draft guys they draft better players than people are expecting them to, and they're able to polish them quickly before they get into the NFL. Guyton's got a chance because unlike a lot of other developmental tackles, he does have good tape. It's just not all the time. A lot of these other guys, they're literally projects. They have good athleticism and the tape isn't good. Guyton has a lot of good tape, just also has a lot of bad tape. And then the other thing is, I wonder if Cooper Beebe could start at center, because you are looking at this and saying, I don't know where he fits necessarily on this team, but he could probably start. Like in a team that had a hole at guard, he should be starting right away, and I think would be a good player.
Yeah.
The Cowboys don't have a hole at guard. Their two best players are at guard. So you're like, well, where does Beebe fit in this offense? He played tackle for Kansas State. I don't think you want him doing that in the NFL. He's just not that type of player. He also played guard. He didn't play center. At least if he did, it was a handful of snaps. But that's arguably their most acute need right now. Can you kick him inside and try and play him at center?
Doesn't feel like the athlete that they would want there, but he's closer to Tyler Biadasz as an athlete. I mean, Travis Frederick wasn't an athlete in testing terms,
right?
But he moved well on the field, right? He was making some of the best reach blocks.
And Beebe actually, like his athleticism testing was pretty good. He just doesn't look like one.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see if they do try Beebe. I mean, they should at least try it. Try Beebe at center. Right now they have Brock Hoffman slated to start at center. I don't know if that's the plan going into the season.
PFF Gas says he's a high-end athlete.
So there we go.
For a big man.
I wouldn't. Remember I said don't use gas for offensive linemen? Or at least not to project performance necessarily. But
I'm just saying I'm
to project
athleticism.
athleticism.
I'm saying that the man might look.
Yeah.
Not like what's that? You like this 80s wrestling, Dusty Rhodes, right? I don't look like the athlete of the day is supposed to look, right? He might look a little bit like Dusty Rhodes.
Now you're getting me. Cooper Beebe's the American dream here.
There you go.
It's the American dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Just saying, he's a better athlete than people are giving him credit for.
Gets the job done. maybe a little, drops an elbow on some defensive tackles.
So this is kind of what we're saying. Like, it's figuring out what the 5 looks like. Like, if their 5 ends up being Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe at center, Zach Martin at right guard, and then hoping Terrence Steele bounces back, I mean, it could work.
One other storyline here with Dallas. Remember, they were picking at 24. They traded out of that spot. They traded down all the way to 29. And in that time, the pick after that was tackle Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, and then Graham Barton by the Bucs. A lot of people wanted Barton for the Cowboys, and that would help potentially, if you believe in Barton's versatility, give them a center option or maybe a tackle option, whatever you want to call it. So they get Guyton to 29. It did seem like that was still their guy that they wanted. He does have all the traits to be a good left tackle. Like I said, it's just, he's, coming from to me, it's an uphill battle just from a production and projection standpoint right now.
Somebody called Fern Delisle, I think, in the chat says that BB has been training at center, and that's where he'll play. So I endorse that as a concept. I think that makes sense.
Let's give it a shot there. The other interesting thing about this draft, so Marshawn Kneeland at edge, he reminded me a little bit of Marcus Davenport from a playing style standpoint. A smaller school power edge defender. I think it gives them some DeMarcus Lawrence insurance as Lawrence heads into the last year of his contract, and you need to pay a lot of players. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. Probably going to be difficult to keep DeMarcus Lawrence, so Kneeland's going to play a big role on this team in the coming years. And if you look at the draft in totality, tackle, edge, guard/center in Cooper Beebe, a line of scrimmage type of draft for the Cowboys here.
Yeah, Kneeland's an interesting player. Like, he struck me as another one of these tweeners where I don't know if I just have an inclination to say that guys that are slightly tweener feel better inside than they do on the edge to me, but he was another one that did. But his athleticism is actually pretty high end, and he's got the arm length. Like, there's no reason he can't play on the edge. It's just that I felt like he was better inside for them. Another pick I wanted to give him a shout out for is Ryan Flournoy in the 6th round, Southeast Missouri State. I really liked him as a day 3 sleeper in this draft. Like, he's a really good athlete. He's good at contested catches. He's fearless over the middle. He doesn't quite know what he's doing yet as a route runner, like the level of competition he was playing at. So he's 6'1", 200 pounds. The level of competition he was playing at, he didn't need to know what he was doing. You know what I mean? Like, you can just win by being a good athlete. If you're an NFL athlete playing at Southeast Missouri State as a wide receiver, if you're just a good athlete who can catch, you're going to be a pretty productive receiver there. So he tends to either just sort of run to a spot or, just tries to shake the defensive back without actually having a plan, sort of route running set of tools to do that. But like, if they're able to sort of teach him, get him here, okay, here's how you actually play wide receiver. Here are the route running nuances. Here's how you move defenders with your route rather than just trying to shake loose a guy in man coverage. He could end up being, I think, a good NFL player despite being a 6th round pick.
The other one to highlight for me is cornerback Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest. Moves pretty well and can sit behind, sit at 4 or 5 on the depth chart right now as he develops. So solid all around for the Cowboys. We good?
Yeah.
Got no more use for the Cowboys. We're on to the New York Giants. They finished 14th in the consensus and an A- from the PFF draft board. Giants get Malik Neighbors to start, followed by safety Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, Andrew Phillips, the cornerback out of Kentucky. I know both of those guys, Trevor favorites, Nubin and especially Andrew Phillips at corner. Theo Johnson, the tight end out of Penn State. One of your favorites, running back Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue. Just 6 picks for the Giants, but I feel like, looks solid across the board here.
Yeah, and honestly, just the 6 picks part was my only real criticism of this draft. I like the first 5 players they selected. I don't dislike the last one. I think this was a really good draft. My only criticism was they could have maybe traded down a couple of times and tried to add some more picks for a team that did need a lot of help. But Malik Neighbors, elite wide receiver prospect. A lot of people thought he was the best receiver in the draft. I wasn't one of them, but I understand the argument. Like, he's that good. Tyler Nubin, in my opinion, is a first-round talent. The only thing keeping him out of the first round was a 40 time. So if you say that doesn't matter, or if you think you can play around that, he's a high-end safety to add to this team. He's got some really interesting – so he attacks blocks better than most of the linebackers in this class. Like, he will throw his shoulder into a block towards the line of scrimmage and win that contact battle in a way the linebackers aren't even trying to do at this point. But he's also, the thing that he does best, in my opinion, is playing with really impressive ability to watch both the quarterback and the route development at the same time, right? He's able to bounce his eyes between the two and not get locked in on either one of them. That's a really difficult skill for a safety, and he has it in spades. So really like those first two picks. Andrew Phillips, Theo Johnson, and Tyrone Tracy, I think, are all players that could make an impact, particularly the two offensive guys. Theo Johnson, the Darren Waller, will he, won't he retire thing is still out there, so getting a tight end that could come in and be a big part was important for them. And then Tyrone Tracy, that dude, former wide receiver, became a running back, is incredibly difficult to get to the ground. Is very raw because he's so new to being a running back, but he has like legitimate talent in this draft.
A couple of guys I wanted to highlight here. So Neighbors, of course, bringing him in as an explosive wide receiver. We talked a lot about the draft. A lot of teams had Malik Neighbors as wide receiver 1, so Giants probably feeling good about that, getting him at 6. Now he's combined with Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt from last year. They've got some field stretching ability on this team. And Daniel Jones has never had a guy like Malik Neighbors. Whether, Daniel Jones is there for one more year or not, they're putting pieces in place so they could actually, create offense a little bit better than they have the last couple of years. So love having Neighbors there. Theo Johnson was a guy I highlighted before the draft as the, quote, upside guy because of his combine, right? When we look at tight end evaluations, combine matters more for tight end than any other position. And Theo Johnson had a 91st percentile 40-yard dash at 4.57, 97th percentile vertical with a 40-inch vert, 10.5-inch broad, or 10-foot 5-inch broad, 94th percentile. And the shuttle was really good too, 92nd percentile for Theo Johnson, 4.19. And all at 6'6", 259.
Yeah,
he is
big
a
guy.
Big frame. Right, in a draft where you've got Brock Bowers is 6'3", and some of these other tight ends are 6'2", 6'3". They're yak types. Theo Johnson, probably the best combination of old school tight end frame but still athleticism. So am I saying he's the next Mark Bavaro for the Giants?
Sounds like it.
Absolutely, he is. So I think he has a chance again to be one of those better NFL players than college players. Be very excited about that. Andrew Phillips had a lot of fans. Dane Brugler really liked him. I mentioned Trevor really liked him. Phillips is a corner that can play inside or outside. He's really feisty. He's just I think he loses track of the ball down the field a little bit sometimes. But yeah, 2 players added to the secondary. Tracy, as you mentioned, a very young running back who brings some versatility to the backfield. And then it all comes down to Malik Neighbors. If he becomes that high volume, big play receiver too, high volume and big play threat, a guy that can attack down the field and create after the catch, Giants will feel pretty good about this one.
Yeah, and I don't give them any criticism for not getting a quarterback. I think at pick number 6, they were always in a difficult situation where, again, like the whole dynamic of this draft is clearly not every team viewed these quarterbacks like the consensus, right? It didn't just go Caleb Williams number 1, and then like a coin flip between Jaden Daniels, Drake May, number 2, number 3, and then J.J. McCarthy, number 4, and then Bo Nix, Michael Penix, 5-6, somewhere lower down, towards the end of the first round. Like, obviously, evidently, that's not how each individual team viewed this group of quarterbacks. So you can't just look at it and say, well, the Giants had QB4 or whatever sitting there at all times and could have taken him. Maybe they didn't. Like, who knows what their quarterback list looked like? And if they viewed this as a 2-quarterback class and they were both gone, number 1, number 2, they would obviously be out of the quarterback market. Like, Daniel Jones can steer the ship for a year and then we'll deal with quarterback next year.
I mean, you have an idea of what they think the quarterback class is. It's a top 3, I assume. They were never going to trade up to 2 with Washington. So we don't know their Jaden Daniels evaluation. But clearly, if the reports are true that they were trying to get to 3 to get to Drake May,
right,
they thought he was the guy, and they didn't think it. So we know that they would take a quarterback. We also know that they would not take J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix.
Right.
So I think they think it was a top 3. They made their move for the top 3. So we did this for New England. What were the options for the Giants? Had they executed that trade, moved it up to 3, the rumor was that it was pick 6 that they had, and then next year's first rounder. To get Drake May, they would have given up an opportunity at Malik Neighbors, and then not had next year's first rounder. So it would have been Drake May on. We probably would have been saying the same thing about Drake May. Okay, he's got a rough supporting cast as a starting point here. The Giants have more work to do.
Yeah, it sounded like New England's asking price for that pick was bordering on unreasonable. Multiple teams took a run at it. Neither one of them was able to get it. The Vikings in particular was the type of deal that you would have assumed would have got the deal done before the draft, and they weren't able to make it happen. So from that point of view, I don't think you can criticize the Giants too hard for saying they failed to get a quarterback. They took a run at it. They decided the value wasn't good enough given what New England was demanding, and they elected instead to stay at 6 and do other things with that with the pick and with their draft. And I think that's fine. I
agree. No, I'm perfectly fine with it. I think it's just interesting to lay out what they were trying to do, what they ended up doing, and where they ended up landing. Giants get an A- on the PFF grading scale. Next up, I get no more use for the Giants. Philadelphia Eagles, number 3 on the composite grades and A+ from PFF, and the hashtag Howie does it again. Eagles sit there at 22. They get, I think, the top corner in the draft, Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. They double up at corner, Cooper DeJean from Iowa at pick 40, a guy that was rumored to go in the first round. Trevor's guy loves Cooper DeJean, so doubling up at corner for the Eagles. Other Sam favorite, Will Shipley, running back out of Clemson in round 4. Steve favorite, Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson in round 5. And then they finish it off with wide receiver Johnny Wilson from Florida State, center Dylan McMahon from NC State. Really nice draft all around, again, for the Eagles.
Yeah, hard not to like this draft. Even if, it gets such an amazing grade for PFF in large part because Cooper Mustard was Trevor's number 8 overall player in the draft. So it thinks that's one of the steals of the draft. I honestly think where they drafted him was kind of the right area for where he should have gone, because I don't know that they are convinced that he's an outside corner, right? And if you're not, so the thing about the Mustard evaluation is if you don't think he's an outside corner, if you look at his tape and you say that sort of hip stiffness and lack of change of direction on outside corner things is a little concerning, and I don't know if you can play him outside, which a lot of people thought, not just me. Chris Sims thought the same thing. You'll read that in a bunch of scouting reports. It sort of questions that, right? And that was the one thing we didn't get any measurable data on because he didn't do those change of direction things. No 3-cone, no short shuttle, which may have been the medical stuff, right? He was only just cleared. But the point is, it remains an unknown element of his game. So if you look at that and you say, I don't know if he can play outside corner, then all of his outside corner tape in college is kind of irrelevant. And now we're projecting him to safety and him to the slot, which is a difficult thing to do. And it's guesswork to a degree, right? So at that point, I don't think you can put him in the middle of the first round. I think you have to start saying this is more of a projection than we're comfortable with. We like his size. We like his athleticism. We like what he's doing in these roles in college. And we think that will apply or translate to this role at the next level. But Kyle Hamilton went towards the bottom of the first round with all the evidence he was a superstar doing that stuff, right? So if that's the kind of role you envisage for him, but without any of that tape, I think this is a fair spot for him to go.
Is another comp, is it Minkah Fitzpatrick when he came out? Because Minkah played in the slot at Alabama, and some people were like, well, let's kick him out
or
to
Brian
corner.
Branch. You're right. But he's
Minkah, bigger. Minkah's more of a size comp.
Yeah, no, Minkah's a good version of that because you are projecting what he did. He did a different role in college than he was going to do at the NFL. And actually, the NFL screwed it up the first time around, right? The Miami Dolphins
they kept him at nickel. He struggled. Yeah,
they didn't use him in the right way. And then it was only when he moved to sort of free safety that you got the best version of him. But yeah, I think that's a reasonable comp in terms of and that might explain where he was drafted relative to where DeJean Mustard. But
Coopers,
yeah. Where Minkah, the Dolphins evidently planned to keep him in the role that they'd seen all the tape in, right? It just didn't work that well. And it was actually the projection that ended up getting the best version of him. Look, I think the point being, given the question marks around Cooper DeJean Mustard, 40 overall is where he should have gone, which makes it a decent pick, not like the best value pick of the entire draft. Quinyon Mitchell at 22 to me is a much better value pick than Mustard in the second round. But then the draft just kept going. Jalix Hunt in the third round is like, he's one of the most fascinating prospects in this entire draft. His tape is comical in college. It's literally
Houston Christian.
Yeah, it's literally like taking any random NFL edge rusher you can think of, like legitimate NFL edge rusher athlete, and just saying, go play at a ridiculously terrible level in college. Just see what the tape looks like, right? That's what his tape is. He was not tested at all. There were multiple reps where he was able to simply run around the offensive tackle without even having to attempt to move. Just, I can run all the way around you and get to the quarterback before you can even get to the landmark. That's how impressive that's how big a disparity the athleticism was. So you're going to take a guy who's got legitimate NFL athleticism and tools and just see if he can play the game, because his college tape doesn't really give you a good indicator of that. And then Will Shipley, we mentioned that. I love him as a running back prospect. I think he's a really, really good player. And then Johnny Wilson in the 6th round. People were going a bit crazy on Johnny Wilson, I think. Like, some people love that guy. Josh Norris loves him from Underdog. Thinks he's an amazing receiver. Like, look at his size, look at his movement skills.
He was 113 on the consensus board.
Yeah.
By draft
So,
day.
I mean, I think some people were going a bit overboard, but to get him in the 6th round is a phenomenal steal.
Yeah, just to go back through some of those players, I think Quinyon Mitchell also in Vic Fangio's scheme here. I mean, Quinyon is an off-coverage player, reads receivers extremely well, breaks on the ball, showed at the Senior Bowl that he could also play press. Probably doesn't have to do that as much in this system anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a great scheme fit. I think the storyline to keep an eye on here is I thought if Mitchell went in the top 10, I don't think that would have been crazy. I don't know if it was because there was 4 or 5 first-round caliber corners that they dropped. I don't know if it's because the league is devaluing the position a little bit, both on the market, in the marketplace and in the draft. But I think it's a steal at 22. And as far as Dijon goes, I like the fact that they still have – I don't know what they're going to do after the draft, if there are cuts coming as far as James Bradbury, if there are still moves to be made as far as James Bradbury and Darius Slay and now the Quinyon Mitchell selection. But Dijon can play – multiple roles, maybe even learn from C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's played that nickel/safety role. So I just like the fact that they could fit those pieces as needed because of some perceived depth there. The other guy to highlight too, as I mentioned, Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson. I really thought he was going to be a 1st or 2nd round pick last year coming in, and then people soured on him a little bit. He looked a little off from a coverage standpoint last year. He's almost when you watch linebackers, sometimes he's patient to a fault. I think either reading plays or in coverage, or he's often in position but a little bit late to react. But man, he plays like an old school thumper to me, but in a smaller body. So I think Trotter can do some damage in the run game, and just has to be a tick faster reacting in coverage. But he's been very productive at Clemson, and the model really liked him. So I love that as a model guy. At pick 155, I'm a big fan of that. And
for the first time, I get to dive into the undrafted free agent tracker and say that Philadelphia signed Kendall Milton from Georgia. I liked him as a running back prospect.
Oh, I didn't get my chance to explain Leonard Taylor III for the Jets.
But
I don't want to screw up the Eagles one-off video right here. So I will not talk about Leonard Taylor.
They also got Gabe Hall, who is just, I mean, he's not a good player, but he's an interesting body type and athlete.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of players who started to get hyped up who I was like, I don't think they should go. Nothing against the player. I don't think they should go in, round 3 or 4. I thought Gabe Hall was a guy that was going to get some of that hype. But developmental UDFA, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Another classic, like 3-4 defensive end shape in a league that isn't doing that anymore. Has the traits, just wasn't particularly good.
The other thing to add about Johnny Wilson as a 6'7" wide receiver, add that to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. They added Devontae Parker. I don't know when and if Johnny Wilson sees the field.
Right.
But I like him in a situation where can he be the 5th target and, a specialization type of role, specialist type of role. I think that all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing. Dylan McMahon I pegged as the upside interior offensive lineman.
There you go.
With his athleticism. So could develop into the next Jason Kelce with his workout.
Wow.
So there you go.
So hard not to like this draft.
I'm not saying he will, but hard not to like it.
Sounded like what you were saying.
All right, where are the Commanders on this whole thing? Washington Commanders. So the Eagles finished third in the composite grade. The Washington Commanders finished fourth in the composite grade. They got an A from PFF in number 4 across the board. It all started with Jaden Daniels at quarterback at number 2. They had 3 second-round picks, using on Johnny Newton at pick 36, Mike Sanderstill from Michigan, the slot corner, Ben Sinnott, the tight end out of Kansas State, and then had a couple third-rounders as well. Offensive tackle / guard, Brandon Coleman out of TCU, and then Luke McCaffrey capped round 3 at pick 100. Wide receiver out of Rice, Christian McCaffrey's brother, of course. And then even beyond that, linebacker Jordan McGee from Temple. I know Renna really liked him. I thought that was really good value in round 5. So good draft for Washington. I think overall, as we were doing the live draft, we said, hey, they need a tackle. They need a tackle. And they kept taking better football players than the tackles who were on the board. So I like that they stayed to that strategy. I think they still have some work to do on the offensive line before next season if they can, but really like Washington adding a lot of talent to this team.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they go quarterback at the top of the draft as well. Jaden Daniels, their guy. We all would have gone Drake May, but I don't think any of us, it's not a big enough gap that any of us like dislike the pick. It's just that's where they came down when it came to the choice between those two guys. It's entirely, I think, justifiable, defendable, whatever you want to say. But it gave them the same kind of dilemma that the Patriots have, right? Okay, you've made your quarterback pick. Now what are you going to put around that guy to make sure that he succeeds? The difference being that they're in a much better position to start with when it comes to wide receiver help. So really Washington's focus in terms of building around Jaden Daniels is the offensive line, because you've already got Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. You've got players to work with in terms of receivers that he should be fine. But the offensive line definitely has the capacity to be a problem with only really one high-end player.
Just to highlight
Sam Cosmi there.
Yeah, can we just highlight what they have so far? So Cornelius Lucas, as of today, would probably be the starting left tackle. I think he's a very good swing tackle. He's in like year 12 or 13 in the NFL, isn't he? I mean, he's getting up there in age. Nick Allegretti, a good, fine rotational guard type. Tyler Biotish is okay at center. Samuel Cosmi, who you mentioned, probably the best player playing right guard. And then Andrew Wiley at tackle. Wiley feels better at tackle if he's the 4th best player.
Yeah,
on the roster. Or
like three or four of their starters feel like if they're your 4th or 5th best player, you're okay. If they're all playing together,
yeah,
right. If they're all on the field together and they're 4 5ths of your offensive line, that feels like a problem.
And then from Coleman from TCU, another guy made my upside list as a guy that has the measurable traits that have historically led to better NFL performance. But Coleman really struggled last year compared to 2022. Played some guard, played some tackle. I don't think Coleman's ready to step in and contribute. So just to get that out of the way, I still, over time, I like the idea that, okay, we didn't panic and just take 3 offensive linemen in the second round. They got some really good football players. So I think the Commanders got better. Post-draft now, we do have to have some concerns about what this line's looking like, though, heading into Jaden Daniels' rookie season.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the guys we like. I mean, getting Johnny Newton in the top of the second round, a guy that we would have been fine with. There was hype for him going as high as, top 15, top 20, just an interior, slightly undersized, but disruptor. And so, again, I like that. I don't care that they have Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne already on the roster. Johnny Newton will get in there and, be part of the rotation and make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, he's a classic best player available type of pick, right? Number 1, I think that's an absolute steal. I think Johnny Newton is a really good player, 40-plus pressures last season, 15.4% pass rush win rate, and unlike a lot of these other interior players in college, most of his snaps came in the kind of alignment he'll be deployed in the NFL, right? Some of these other guys, because of the college schemes, they're playing these strange sort of 3-3-5 stacks. They're head up over players. They're trying to rush the passer from heads up alignment. In the NFL, you're not going to be doing that. He's going to be a 3-tech, and he was playing 3-tech most of the time. So I think that's a good thing for him. And yeah, look, number 1, those 2 interior guys they have are both on monster contracts. There's no guarantee they're not going to want to shed one of those, sooner rather than later. Number 2, even if they don't, they were both playing 800-plus snaps last season. Like, there are 500 snaps you could give Johnny Newton that would give those guys some rotation and a breather.
Both coming off of Allen's worst season as a pro, 59 grade. Daron Payne just a 61. They didn't play all that well last year, despite having that high price tag.
So there's ample opportunity to get him on the field without, he's not roadblocked to getting on the field because they have those two guys on big contracts already. It makes sense.
Mike Sanders still just a favorite of every draft analyst, I think, just because he's that slot corner who loves to get dirty in the run game, packs a punch, tackling, very good zone defender, former receiver with very good ball skills. You liked a Kenny Moore comp for him?
Yeah.
Pick your favorite slot receiver who's willing to get dirty in the run game. For me, it was Mike Hilton because of he's awesome zone defender, sees the game really well. He's going to blow up screens. I think he picked off a screen just like Mike Hilton did in the playoffs a couple years ago. But if you leave him one-on-one, get stuck a little bit. You get beat up one-on-one. So if you put Sanders still in the right position, I think he's a very good football player.
Yep, absolutely.
And then Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State, another one of those very athletic tight ends who I think has a chance to be good at the next level. He's not as big as Theo Johnson from the Giants, more of a move type of tight end. He's willing to block in the run game. I don't think he's your inline block a defensive end type, but I think he's got a chance to be a pretty good receiving weapon. So I think Sinnott as a receiving weapon, right now they've got Zach Ertz, but Sinnott down the road with Terry McLaurin, with Jahan Dotson, I think that helps quite a bit for Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, Sinnott looked like a wide receiver at times, like just that type of tight end rather than, your bigger, slower, plodding, all-around inline blocking tight end.
And then Luke McCaffrey tested extremely well. Pick 100, last pick of the third round, 4.02 20-yard shuttle, 6.7 three-cone at 6'2", 203, ran a 4.46. I know Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl really highlighting him. I think he knows how to play the slot and, smart player, go up and get it type of receiver who did test really well. I think McCaffrey's got a chance to be pretty solid as well.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of what the Commanders did. And so for me, judging the draft is generally about did you get good players at the spots that you were allotted? Did you have a good process and, the trades that you made, the moves that you made? I think overall the Commanders did a great job there. Just have to highlight the offensive line, even though I would never advocate just go fill those spots. It is still, I think, a glaring need heading into the 24 season.
Yeah, they'll be an interesting team to see what they do, if anything, in terms of, the post-draft free agent market, which is a big thing. Like, there's still a lot of quality players at various positions throughout the NFL available, right? There are teams that can go and, plug gaps, at least as a stopgap measure, and get a starter and, roll in. Now, again, part of their problem is that they already have 4 of those guys in the offensive line. So adding a different 4, might not make a massive difference to them. But
it's another one. If you get the high end, if you get the best of all those guys, it'll work out. It's just
So and maybe simply adding the competition is worth doing from their point of view, given the quarterback investment. But it'll be interesting to see if they do go and maybe pick off 1 or 2 of those offensive linemen.
So that wasn't bad. We've gone way faster than we have in the past.
Yeah, this is unusual. How have we done that quickly?
Didn't we usually take 2 hours, or was it like an hour and a half per?
No, these are usually 2-hour behemoths. How have we managed to do that in an hour and 20?
I think we were just good to the point. We didn't get into every last detail. We did spend a lot of time on night 1 talking about all the round 1 picks and went pick by pick.
Undrafted, Washington got Sam Hartman, the Notre Dame.
They paid him a pretty good UDFA salary.
Heartthrob quarterback.
Good hair. He's got really good hair.
Now, if Joe Milton was brought in to make Drake May look accurate by proxy, has Sam Hartman been brought in to make Jaden Daniels just look phenomenal across the board by proxy?
Everything.
Yeah.
Faster, more accurate.
Better athlete,
arm.
bigger arm. Everything except being good looking.
Just good guy to have in the room.
Just a nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Hartman's good. It's good to have in the building. Anything else about the East drafts here that we want to discuss? Any questions? Questions from the chat?
I'm
confused.
I feel like we went
How
does this happen this fast? We've never done this, ever.
I don't feel like we skimped on information. I mean, we were never going to, break down every last pick or anything like that, but we did everything we could.
Yeah,
we're out early.
I'm confused.
Sometimes you finish the workday early and you
it's totally unprepared.
You go home.
Totally unprepared for this.
I figured that'd
just
be fun.
Fade out here.
I just figured the radio silence would be It would be fun here.
Huh.
So we're going to do this every week. I mean, every day this week. We should just record the next one right now.
Well, settle down there.
We'll do the Norths, the Souths, and the Wests over the next few days, going team by team. I think hour and 20 minutes is all we need for each show. And I may have secured Mike Renner to join the show next Monday.
Young
and
Michael.
get his draft recap takes for next week.
I like the idea of getting Renner in to talk about specific fits, players landing in certain spots.
Yeah.
And now forget, where we all are of rehashing our opinions on each one of these prospects, but now we've seen where they've landed, right? Forget talking about how good is Brian Thomas Jr. overall. Talk specifically about what does Brian Thomas Jr. do within this Jacksonville offense now that we know that's where he's going. Same with the quarterbacks and their landing spots.
Fits and landing spots.
Yeah.
And we'll find out, he loves Bo Nix. He loves some of those players more than others, and he'll bring, some fresh perspective here to the PFF NFL podcast, as he always did. All right, we good?
Somebody would like a favorite pick across the NFC East. Sleepless night in the chat.
Off the top of my head, I think it's Quinyon Mitchell from the Eagles. Second stretch. Look, I know they collapsed down the stretch last year, but last year's draft, Jalen Carter, they did trade up one spot to get him. But Jalen Carter, I liked Nolan Smith at the time. I like Quinyon Mitchell. I like Cooper DeJean. I just think over time the Eagles are making a lot of good decisions here.
Yeah, my favorite pick in that whole group might have been Johnny Newton to Washington in the second round. I think that was phenomenal value. Tyrone Tracy to the Giants in the fifth round, I think, was a steal as well. There were some nice picks in the Easts.
Great. All right, man. That's it.
All right.
We can be done.
I don't understand how this has happened.
Feels weird.
It's like an hour earlier than we've normally done.
It is. It's okay. We're going to go home. We're going to go see my kids. It's okay.
Okay.
All right, it's good. All right, so here's the deal. Tomorrow, 10:30. Wednesday, 10:30. Thursday, 10:30. We'll go through the rest of the division. So that's it for us today. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow with more PFF NFL Podcast.